So, Kevin, welcome to the Export to Japan podcast.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Pleasure indeed.
One of the first questions that I really wanted to kick off was, can you tell us a little bit about how the recruitment process here in Japan may differ to the international world, if at all?
In Japan, we see the process taking actually quite a bit of time. It usually takes about 3 to 4 months from contacting a recruiter or posting a job all the way through to the actual hire of the individual. This is a combination of things. Basically, we have, it takes about 1 to 2 months to interview, to complete the interview process, which is usually maybe a 3-step process from initial, secondary, and maybe meeting up with the CEO. From that point forward, then the candidates, by Japanese law, have to give 1 month's resignation to their existing employer, though some companies do actually expand on that as well.
Okay.
And they require 2 months' notice.
Okay.
So the process itself can actually take quite a bit of time.
Yeah, okay. But there's no specific things that you would flag up to our international listeners to say there is this marked difference. It's a relatively similar process in general terms, is it, to recruit?
Yes, indeed. But I would also say that hiring in Japan tends to be quite expensive in terms of the actual cost. Utilizing a recruiter. Abroad, we see commissions for recruitment agencies being roughly 20%. But in Japan, because it's such a there's so many jobs available for so few candidates, we see that the expenses can go upwards of 35%.
Wow, okay.
To some recruiters are currently even asking 40%.
40% of the salary,
Yes.
the first year salary. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I want to come on to that in a second. Thank you for highlighting that. That's an amazing point, and I think 1 or 2 of our listeners are probably paying attention to that right now. But we'll come on to that, both that sort of cost infrastructure and the various options that are available in a moment. I guess the next point I really wanted to learn from you, and you perhaps did touch on it a little bit there, but would you regard the current human resource market in Japan as being employer-friendly or employee-friendly?
In terms of the market, at the moment, it is actually very employee-friendly. So Japan, the current unemployment rate is 2.2%. So it's very, very small. And the number of jobs available and the number of companies looking for staff is very high. So basically, candidates have nearly 1.5 jobs.
Right, per candidate. Per available candidate,
yes,
there are 1.5 jobs of it. Wow, that's a hell of a ratio.
And that seasonally, of course, it changes, but in general, that is just increasing.
And I'm guessing within that sort of 2 to 3% unemployment rate here, most of the overseas companies that are looking to hire people are looking for sort of quality, educated, higher level talent, and invariably, in most cases, looking for bilingual talent.
Indeed.
So I think the chances of finding that within that 2% of unemployed people here in Japan is pretty limited, right?
Indeed, and that's why recruiters, the Japanese market is so heavy with recruitment agencies.
Yes.
I think there's, last quote I heard was over 3,000 active bilingual recruitment agencies in Tokyo.
3,000 in Tokyo?
Yes.
Gosh. That's
and
wow.
A lot of them are grabbing people from the same places,
That's right.
right, potential candidates.
Yeah.
So that's an indicator of what I said previously, why the recruiting costs are so high.
Got it.
So,
and would you say then, from your experience in this market, in the majority of recruitment cases when overseas companies are looking to hire here, is the result normally that we hire somebody who is in an existing job rather than somebody who's out there available looking for a job? In most cases, it's someone
cases.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
In my experience, companies tend to not want to hire somebody who's unemployed. And we see a lot of headhunting. Specifically, the recruitment agencies use headhunting techniques to gather their candidates for potential employers.
Got it, yeah. And I guess that process must bring in an additional challenge, because if we're working in a market where generally there's this culture and feeling of sort of security in a job and staying in a job long term, and the comfort factor of working for Japanese companies and all the feelings around that, and then start-up foreign companies coming into the market for the first time, trying to find that good talent and then convince that good talent to leave those jobs and come and join them. Is that a challenge that you come across?
We're seeing the job environment change over the years. Previously, of course, Japan was, the big Japanese companies were doing lifelong employment from university new grads all the way through, and you stay in the same job. One of the aspects of that is, which maybe differs from companies abroad, would be that a company will hire somebody not into a position, but hire them as a staff. And then that staff would then slowly move up the ranks and change, and maybe work in different divisions throughout their career within that company. This has led to, of course, a lot of companies, the pyramid hierarchy, and there's a lot of mid-level career individuals now who don't see that lifelong employment option as sexy, shall we say, as previously. So we're seeing a lot of mid-career guys, well, not a lot, but we're slowly seeing an increased number starting to think about moving to other companies as well, which means foreign companies are slowly becoming more attractive.
Oh, I see. That's an interesting trend. Over what sort of period have you noticed that trend happening? Is that a very recent thing, or?
Well, I mean, I've been in Japan for 16 years. I've been doing HR and recruitment for the last 6. And basically, over those years, we've seen more foreign companies interested in Japan, especially right now due to the yen. So I think it's a combination of factors, but slowly over the years we see more foreign companies, more startups as well, slowly are coming into the marketplace. And Japan's government is also spending a lot of money on trying to get these new businesses up and running. So we're seeing people move a little bit more frequently than they have in the past.
Yeah. So it sounds like a number of trigger points are all causing this change in the market that you've noticed. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay. Now, talking about your experience there, the number of years you've been involved in this and been doing this, what would you say, if I had to say to you, give us the top 3 tips, in your opinion, that international companies should think about when they're coming over to Japan and looking to hire talent in Japan? What would your top 3 be?
I think the first would be make sure that you prepare an adequate amount of time for the hiring. Like I mentioned earlier, it does take 4 months or so to actually onboard potential employees. So having the company provide enough time for that process is, I think, extremely important. And back home in the West, you would see maybe it's a lot shorter, the onboarding period. So I think that's a very key point that they have to be careful with. On top of that, if they are going to be, because of course there's a lot of foreigners living in Japan as well, so if they're planning to hire a Japanese or a foreigner, if it's a foreigner, then there's also visa issues that come up, which you will have to get the sufficient licenses.
Even if that potential foreign employee is already here in Japan, there's still considerations there regarding visas?
Yeah, depending on the type of visa that they have. Of course, there's permanent residence, which there's no consideration for the company to worry about.
Right.
But for somebody who's on a working visa, then the company has to help provide documentation and apply to that for that visa.
Got it. Okay, all right. You brought up another point there. You sort of touched on HR legislation and things, and I would like to explore that a little bit more deeply with you. Certainly something I hear in Japan is that it's much more of a culture of when you employ somebody, you need to be prepared to be very committed to the employment of that person. It's not this sort of, I don't like the expression, but hire and fire is the expression that comes to mind. So it's certainly not that kind of culture here in Japan, is it? So could you give a few thoughts on that and perhaps talk about the HR legislation or sort of give us an overview of any points there?
Japanese law tends to protect the employee of course. So therefore, a company has to be quite careful about how they manage their staff. And to actually fire somebody in Japan is actually very difficult, especially in the long term, if they've been with a company for a number of years. So typically Japanese companies will not really fire somebody. They may do things that will help that employee decide to move on. But commonly they will maybe move them through different areas to find a job that may be more suitable for them.
Yes.
But to actually fire somebody outright is quite difficult in Japan. And I think foreign companies will need to be quite careful in how they manage the disciplinary process. And I think the other thing would be teamwork as well. Like in the office, Japanese companies and Japanese staff tend to work in a more teamwork-orientated environment than maybe we do in the West. So I think having that mindset, the management of the company needs to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, okay. I mean, what I sense there through a few of your comments and answers to the questions, there is a little bit of a theme coming out there. And going back to your first point about being prepared to take time and do the process to recruit somebody properly, I guess by doing that, you're giving yourself the best chance of making sure you get the right hire. And I guess that's the critical thing that then avoids problems further down the line, isn't it? If you cut corners and do things too quickly and make a decision based on anything that's not really thorough investigation and good recruitment process, then you could be giving yourself a problem a little bit later if it doesn't work out for any reason.
And also, on top of that, is when looking for staff as well, I think one of the key factors, in my experience and through a lot of my clients, is that you need to try and find somebody who maybe has previous experience either within a foreign company or has traveled abroad or studied abroad, because they have there's maybe a slightly different mindset for that individual that would maybe better fit into the company.
Yes, okay, I got that. That makes perfect sense, yeah, okay. Do you find that a high proportion of the candidates that you find and the foreign companies that you help, are they always looking for bilingual staff and bicultural staff? Or
the majority, yes.
Yes.
I think the only time that we would find a company that's not looking for bilingual staff would be a foreign company, would be maybe their internal admin support, customer service, etc., especially if they're dealing with the Japanese public in a B2C or B2B. And in terms of, excuse me, but the majority of companies will be looking for bilingual candidates. We're seeing a lot more interest in foreign candidates who are bilingual as well. It is a small portion of the foreign community in Japan, but we're seeing a lot more interest in foreign bilinguals as well in the marketplace.
Great, okay. Now, in a few minutes, I want to come on to talk about the various options that may be available for international companies, but there's one particular one that I want to ask you about because I've heard a lot about it, and I'm sure you know very well, over in the international world, LinkedIn has just grown in popularity and usage enormously for a variety of reasons, for business networking and connections and all sorts of commercial activities. But I also know very much, where I'm from in the UK and also we do a lot of work in the US, LinkedIn is used really heavily for recruitment out there. But from what I hear, it's less common and less popular to be using LinkedIn as a platform here. Is that true? And if so, could you expand on that a little bit?
I believe it's true. So basically, we see LinkedIn in Japan, last time I checked, had about 1 million users. And it's been here for, I think, about five years or so now. And I think that Japanese tend to not want to put their information in a public forum. It's maybe a variety of reasons, but one of them would be that they consider that it is not appropriate for them to put that information on a public forum, for example, their complete work history, as they're going to ask you to do. Because
as you mention it, when you think about it, it is a very strange thing to do, isn't it? For the rest of us, to put
Sure.
everything, all the fine detail about your entire career and where you were on what dates and what companies you're with. So yeah, when you think about it from that angle,
Yes.
you can see that some cultures might perceive that to be a slightly unusual thing to do.
And also their existing employer. If they see that information online, then the individual maybe feels that it might disrupt.
Yes, could give the wrong signals.
The wrong signals to the company that they are currently working for, and create an unharmonious environment.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to watch that one with through the lens of seeing how these sort of digital services have grown in the Western world, and in some cases here in Japan, grown very quickly. But we know LinkedIn has been slower to take off, and you've given good reasons why, but it will be interesting to see how that one goes over the coming years. Okay, thank you. Now, so the next thing, Kevin, I want to explore is employee benefits here in Japan. So when those international companies make that decision to hire their first person, what considerations do they need to have that are sort of unique to the Japanese market with regard to employee benefits?
Well, there's a few. Number one that pops into my mind would be the bonus system. Across most Japanese companies, especially the medium to large size companies. Typically, because of the lifelong employment, the old school lifelong employment system, bonuses tend to be quite large and happen twice a year, and it could be up to 2 months' salary each time.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, so it's a lot of money.
So 2 months plus 2 months over an annual period.
It could be up to that.
Could be 16 months of salary over a 12-month period. Wow.
So they don't have maybe the same traditional benefits as maybe you would see back in the UK or New Zealand or Australia. They have the main monetary bonus system. But now we are seeing more Japanese companies become involved with gym memberships, free food, the regular kind of perks that we see within Western companies. But I think foreign companies need to be aware that maybe the Japanese expect a similar kind of system or equivalent.
Okay, yeah.
But again, not all Japanese companies do this, but the majority do, especially for their full-time staff.
And on those, with regard to that bonus situation, does that tend to be individually performance related, or is that more company performance related, or is it case by case? I
think it's more part and parcel.
Okay, right.
Basically, again, it's the way that the Japanese companies tend to operate as well. Yeah. So, for example, Toyota, your management is going to get 2 bonuses twice a year as part of their regular pay package.
Very nice.
Good
for them.
Not really good for them.
I'm so glad I bought a Toyota car now.
But we're seeing more performance bonus structures coming into play nowadays as well.
Okay. And I think that it's a fairly minor point, but it's nevertheless a noteworthy one. I think I also heard from somewhere that it can be common to pay your employees commuting expense to come to the office. Does that happen in some cases too?
That's actually nearly 100% of companies will pay the full commute. Because, for example, myself, I live an hour away from work, so I travel 1 hour each way by train every day. So my commute expense does actually work out to be rather expensive. So the company pays that in full for me.
Yeah. Okay. So it's another factor to budget in when you're
indeed
looking to hire your Japanese staff. Yeah.
And,
okay. Interesting.
Japanese staff expect that as part of their contract.
Okay. Okay. Good. Great. Okay. So coming towards the end a little bit now, we've gone through all the various options step by step, but I now want to look at what options are actually available to international companies. And if you could just sort of run through or give us an overview of the options that are available. And a little bit earlier, you touched on some of the costings involved in it too. So if you could also give just some idea of the cost implications of the different options, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, recruitment agencies commission that they claim for placing an employee in your company tend to be more expensive in Japan than they would be back in the UK, for example. So it used to be 25 to 30, then it was 30 to 35, and now we're actually seeing a slow shift towards 35 to 40. Again, it's the declining population, aging population problem here in Japan.
And I guess the state of that market, you said it's an employees market right now, right?
Yeah,
So there's not many good people around to hire.
Yeah, less people, more jobs. And the demand is very high. So especially in, for example, the field of IT, you'll see a huge number of jobs listed on the job boards and by recruiters. So the commission paid for those jobs tend to be quite high. So yeah, the cost for using a recruitment agency tends to be quite high, especially comparative to back home. But also job boards as well. So of course there's a number of domestic job boards as well as some boutique job boards as well that cater towards the bilingual community. And job listings also tend to be more expensive than they would be in the UK. So for example, I think I heard from one UK company, maybe they'll spend £200, whereas here it's more like 2,000.
Wow, gosh, okay. So multiple of 10.
Again, depending on the company you go with, the job board you go with, and the demographic of the users, but in general you will see it could be spending upwards of £3,000, or it could be spending as little as maybe 500.
Okay.
So, and everything in between.
Yeah, got it, okay.
And there's still a few free sites around, but the quality and the maybe not the best place to find desirable employees like Craigslist and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
They tend to be a little bit more.
Yeah. And I guess acknowledging the
lowbrow.
point we said earlier about not wanting to make any mistakes with your recruitment, then it doesn't sound like a good place to be going. It sounds like getting the professional help to find the right people from the outset is the better route.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's interesting to just see the difference in comparison between spending, a few £1,000s against potentially spending up to 35 or 40% of the first year's salary, whatever that may be, depending on the salary.
Exactly.
It's good at least to see those options. So that's good to know. Good. All right. Well, I think we've covered all the main topics. So it's been really interesting, Kevin. We appreciate your time. It's great to pick your brains. You've clearly got a wealth of experience out here in the market. I would urge any of our viewers or our listeners, if you have any other questions for Kevin, please Google him and find him and reach out to Kevin. He'll be happy to help you.
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn.
Great. There we go. Perfect. You're one of the people on LinkedIn, right? And to all you back at home listening in or watching, thank you for your time. We hope you found this podcast useful. Thank you so much.